right, Mark, let's get going. Hello, everybody. I'm Andrea Cumpston, and I'm Communications Director with the Enterprise Wireless Alliance. Today's webinar is Strategies for Securing VRS Frequencies. Before I turn the presentation over to Mark, I want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. Oops, that went too fast. Please mute your phone if you are, which is press star 6 to mute and star 7 to unmute. It's given the ambient noise, please mute your phone. To send us a question, please use the chat box that's in the bottom left of the controls, and you can select who gets the question. So you can send a question directly to Mark if you like. He's one of the co-presenters. You can send it to both presenters. So please submit your questions that way, and we'll address them as quickly as possible. Today's presenters are Mark Crosby and Denisse Ibarra. Mark, as you know, is President and CEO of the Enterprise Wireless Alliance, and Denisse is Director of Spectrum Solutions. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark. Mark?
Thank you, Andrea. Thank everybody for attending this webinar on VRS frequencies. The EWA has been an active participant in this, as we'll see momentarily, for about 5 years, and this is one of those rare events in Washington, D.C. spectrum issues where I think we had a very big win here on behalf of users and licensees and the FCC and the vendors and people that need this capability. I want to recognize, I know there's eventually will be about 60 people on this call, but I know that Chris Carbajal is on, and welcome Chris. Chris is obviously a senior management at Pyramid Communications. I also know that Michelle Fink is on the call. She is with Public Safety Coordination Associates, and I'm glad that both and their participation in this is welcome. And Michelle, I'll say all the right things, and Chris, we can we can connect afterwards if we left any critical information out. How did this all come about? Listen, for those of you that have customers or who require vehicular repeater systems, you know, it was a difficult process because to minimize interference between mobiles and et cetera, and to make the system hum, you needed separation between the mobile side and the vehicular units of at least 2 to 3 meg. And to do that within BILT pools was a little bit easier than it was in public safety pools. And as a consequence, it got complicated, and it was difficult to find appropriate channel separation so that the technology could be deployed properly. And what happened was you ended up resorting to, well, if public safety didn't get the 2 or 3 meg spread, it would seek business industrial land transportation frequencies, which of course is a arduous process because I'm not going to spend time on it. Just trust me that it was an arduous process. You need to prove that there isn't anything in public safety. You need to find BILT channels. You need to make sure it's 2 to 3 meg. And you have to prepare and file a waiver with the FCC. And so the system was sort of not conducive for rapid deployment of VRS in certain circumstances, and we needed a solution. So in 2011, Pyramid Communications originally filed a petition for rulemaking, and they suggested, hey, this is something good. This is good for business industrial, good for public safety. We need help finding channels, etc. And EWA filed comments at that time absolutely supporting this petition. And there was other people weighing in, and there were certain frequencies that were suggested by Pyramid. And hats off to Pyramid. I mean, you got to start somewhere, and especially in D.C. You file a petition, so they did. And EWA was a huge supporter of the effort. 2013, the FCC also sort of recognized and appreciated the effort, and as things go, this is a perfect illustration of how the regulatory process works. Somebody files a petition for rulemaking. If the commission likes it, they issue a notice proposed rulemaking, and they did about 2 years later. And they said, here, we got, and I can't remember, but I think Pyramid identified some of these frequencies and others, and there's 6 173 frequencies that were set aside for data telemetry. And the commission said, you know what, maybe these could be shared, the data telemetry channels, these 6 could be shared with vehicular repeater systems. And they released a notice of proposed rulemaking. Now again, EWA supported it. There were some frequencies that were not supported. One of them was some government forest fire frequency that people had a conniption over. Oh, you can't use that, and I'm going, oh, okay. But at least there was frequencies identified that was a good solution. And I'll tell you, initially the notice received mixed reviews. Some people said, nah, you can't use that. The data telemetry people are there. And I'm not so sure that set so well at the commission because 2 years later, the FCC finally, after you do a notice proposed rulemaking, they reach a decision, and they released a report and order. It says, hey, here are the rules. We agree, and they adopted rule amendments to accommodate vehicular repeater systems on these 6 channels. They noted, and there was over 2,000, maybe 2,500 data telemetry systems licensed, or systems in the United States on these 6 frequencies. But rightfully they observed and said, hey, listen, 2,500, whatever, there's geographic capacity and spectrum capacity in many parts of the country. And they did not agree necessarily with those that said this would be harmful to incumbent data telemetry systems. And so there's sort of always a horse trading, a little quid pro quo on these kind of things. So the commission says, all right, we're going to make, to sort of help the people that were supporting data telemetry, they modified the data telemetry rules in 2 respects, which I'll get to in a minute, but they said, listen, we're going to permit sharing of VRS, and we're going to permit VRS to share with the data telemetry systems on these 6 channels. And we're going to have to change the ground rules to make this work. They recognized that data telemetry is a data system. It doesn't monitor. There's no voices. It's controlling things. Vehicular repeater systems, I doubt when they're deployed and it's an emergency situation, mission critical, they're not monitoring either. And one's voice, one's data. They're incompatible. When they're in the same area, there's going to be problems. So the commission said, listen, we want somebody to come up with frequency coordination protocols to ensure that the 2 disparate technologies can cohabitate on these 6 frequencies without causing harmful interference to one another. And so the LMCC, for those of you unfamiliar with the LMCC, that's Land Mobile Communications Council. It is an organization made up of 19 trade associations that represent vendors, business, industrial, and public safety entities. And there was a couple oddball responses to this commission saying we need coordination protocols. But at the end of the day, and EWA said the only place to get something done properly that everybody would adhere to that would make sense so that we don't have multiple approaches is to run it through the LMCC where all the frequency advisory committees are members and participate. So the LMCC worked on that, got one done, submitted it to the FCC back in 2015, and we waited again. But at the end of the day, the commission, and I'll discuss what the protocol is a bit later in the presentation, but at the end of the day, the FCC says, good idea, good work, go and prosper, issues a public notice, accepting the Frequency Advisory Committee consensus protocol that the LMCC submitted to the commission, and they stated that on March 15th of this year, they're happy to accept applications for vehicular repeater systems on these 6 frequencies. Of course, data telemetry applications could always be submitted on these 6 frequencies and could in the future. I want to just make one observation that at least a trend that EWA sees, and there's multiple examples of this. There are a lot of new technologies coming that provide tremendous value in public service to the United States and to entities and so forth, but there's always not spectrum room. This is a perfect example. Perfect world, Pyramid, EWA, and others sit down and go, oh, here's some spectrum that's not being used. So let's use that for VRS. Those days are gone. All the spectrum has been allocated to somebody. May not be used fully, but it's been allocated to somebody. So in the future, and you can see this everywhere, and medical body networks sharing with aeronautical mobile telemetry, white space devices sharing with broadcasters. And this is another example. Data telemetry systems sharing with vehicular repeater systems. The future is more sharing among disparate technologies, which puts a premium not on who's eligible, who can coordinate, but who can do the work. There's a spectrum management and more sophisticated frequency coordination process to make the sharing work. And that's what happened in this instance, which was a great solution. So, Andrew, there's a couple folks chatting in the background. Make sure they, if you can, mute their phones. What are the rules? These are the general rules. Here are the 6 frequencies. You know, I don't need to repeat them. There's 6 of them. They're pretty good. They're sitting right there at 173, and certainly to get the 2 to 3 meg separation in the 150s and 151, it's a slam dunk to get the separation 2 to 3 meg if there's space on these 6 frequencies for VRS. Who may use them? Now, don't forget that these frequencies were previously available on a primary basis for data telemetry for both business, industrial, and public safety. So who's eligible to access these 6 frequencies for vehicular repeater and or data telemetry? Same. Public safety entities, business, industrial, land, transportation enterprises, and no one has, there's a subtle difference, but no, data telemetry is a primary user, and vehicular repeater systems in the future are primary users. No one is secondary to the other. Both are primary. The other major change, which was a great added by the FCC, was that post-narrowbanding, et cetera, the things, they permitted wider bandwidths for data telemetry and vehicular repeater systems, which obviously is great for vehicular repeater systems. And for data telemetry, it's great because now you can put more throughput through 11 1/4 channel bandwidths, and I think previously they were 6 kilohertz. So this is a good solution all the way around. And those were the general rules. Okay, what do they do for data telemetry? Now this was, I think, was one of the quid pro quos for some of the folks that were not too pleased about having to share these channels with vehicular repeaters. The quid pro quo that the FCC says, all right, listen, we'll remove some of the restrictions on antenna patterns for data telemetry systems. You can do omni, you can do directional, go and prosper. And the other ones that I thought is sort of interesting, they took away the power limits for vehicular repeater, and they're now sort of like subject to the safe harbor table, which means, if you look carefully at the rules, data telemetry systems could have powers up to 500 watts. Now, I don't think that really works real life, and 500 watts for data telemetry things and some of those is somewhat excessive. But EWA, when we looked at the rules, when the power used to be 20 watts, it's now safe harbor. The power levels for data telemetry systems can be higher. I look at that and I go, say, these are mostly municipalities, critical infrastructure entities, and others that have been using these channels for data telemetry. They're not speculators. They're not people that are going to game the system. These are people that have a solution they need, just like VRS, and they're not going to do crazy things like, and as a coordinator, if I see somebody or we see somebody who's got like 3 FXO operational fixed stations, and they're like 3 miles apart from one another to control who knows what, lights or irrigation systems or water things and stuff, and they go, I want 500 watts, we're going to go, I don't know about that. Why? Tell me why you need 500 watts. So I think I'm not too concerned about that rule change, but I'm aware that, and I don't think it's going to be abused, because I think the people that use these for data telemetry in the past, again, are not people that like speculate or like to use the, going to hoard this stuff. Hoarding spectrum today, I'll get off my soapbox real quick, is a bad thing. We don't have enough spectrum to go around now, and as to accommodate new technologies and current needs, and so EWA is very, 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 very protective of land mobile spectrum, because we don't have a lot, and there are probably more technologies coming. But so we'll keep an eye on that. Station classes, data telemetry, nothing new here. They're FXOs or FXOTs. We've seen some MOs on these frequencies, which are a little bizarre, but we're going to treat those. I mean, when you get the coordination protocols, there isn't any exclusivity between an MO3 and an MO. They can share. So there isn't necessarily any engineering done for that. There was one very strange license that we found that is an FB8 with MOs. I look at that and go, how the heck did they get that, right? There's one license out there. Somebody's got a trunk radio system designation, FB8. Mobile's on one of these things, and the staff goes, what are we going to do with those? They go, well, you treat it. You treat it as an FXO, and even though it's a trunk system, I don't know how they got on it. It looks like they got on the licensee, 15, 20 years ago, but that was an interesting little anomaly we spotted in the database. Data telemetry systems. In the future, since they're both co-primary and incompatible, incumbent systems, obviously if there's a new VRS system coming on, must provide protection to the data telemetry. And if you're a new data telemetry in the future and you get there and there's a VRS, whatever, they're co-primary and incompatible, so we'll get to the consensus protocols, treat them all as exclusive users if they're sharing a system. But the data telemetry receive protection from VRS operations now and in the future. And of course, depending on how successful and how rapid or where the growth is for VRS deployments now and in the future after March 15th, there may not be in certain areas. Once the VRS is there and establishes a license that's in compliance in the rules, obviously that may diminish opportunities for data telemetry in that area in the future. But that's sort of like part of the deal. I mean, and I think the FCC sort of, when they said, yes, this is a good solution, VRS, it's obviously known that these frequencies have been available for data telemetry for a long time. And there's 6 frequencies, and all 6 frequencies and every square mile of the United States is not occupied. So if it hasn't been occupied, let's get it in play for another technology that's in need, and that happened to be VRS. And so, I think data telemetry people understand, listen, the VRS is very successful. That removes spectrum for data telemetry, but it's also a two-way street. So what are the VRS rules? MO3 is a station class. I think as a coordinator, if I see goofy stuff like MO6s, I don't think so. I don't think this is not a private carrier solution particularly. This is for public safety, business, industrial, municipalities, for vehicular repeater. I mean, for years we've been trying to find a solution. That's what this is for. 5-watt maximum power. I like that the commission did this. Obviously, what do we fear? I want all 6 of them. And they go, no. You can't get all 6. You get one at a time. And you load that one unit, that one channel, and this is applicable whether you're public safety or business industrial. I want all 6. You can't, and the coordinator goes, sorry, you can't have all 6. You can have 1. And when you load that unit to 50 units and prove it to us that you've loaded it to 50 units, and then you can get another one. And then you have to do the same for that one. And this is so that we don't have an Oklahoma land rush, and there's a fair distribution of the spectrum to accommodate as many people that need VRS or VRS systems in the future. It's a great policy decision on the part of the commission. Area of operation. What was the other fear? people would go in, I want the state of Wyoming, and while I'm at it, give me the state of Montana and the state of Minnesota. And the commission go, well, wait a minute, So this is another great decision. You got to control the use of the spectrum, and so they said for area of operation, for vehicular repeater systems, you may define it by a county, or we'll let you have a maximum 80-kilometer radius from center coordinates. I don't think, and I know Michelle's online, I think all of us, Michelle at PSCA and EW are going to go, don't automatically ask for 80 kilometers. You're not helping yourself. Matter of fact, you may be hurting yourself, which I'm going to show in a minute. 80 kilometers is the max to get primary status. If you ask for 81 kilometers or the state of Virginia, you are now a secondary user, and you're not considered on the next step in. Greed kills. Don't ask for. We'll see it. We'll see it. Somebody comes in. I want the state of Virginia. We're going to tell them not a good idea because you're secondary, and to anybody who comes on the line, don't do that. So I like this rule too. What is the area of operation that's acceptable to receive primary status as a VRS system on these 6 channels? County, or no more than 80-kilometer radius. And just like the reverse quid pro quo for data telemetry systems, VRS, if there's a data telemetry system on that same channel, you've got to do some analysis because you receive protection from co-channel data telemetry and vice versa. And again, the reverse is also true in this case. Depending on data telemetry deployments and how many there are in certain areas, the VRS opportunities may be diminished. You may not be able to get 2 or 1 or whatever. You might have to. We'll have to see. It depends, but that's sort of understood. What are the coordination rules here? Nothing surprising. Whether you're data telemetry or VRS, your application must be certified by a FCC Certified Frequency Advisory Committee. Business industrial applications, if the applicant's business industrial land transportation must be certified by one of the 7 business industrial land transportation coordinators. If the entity is a public safety entity, it must be certified by a public safety coordinator, of which there are 4. And for the record, they are FCCA, IMSA, which together collaborate on that effort as Public Safety Coordination Associates. I will tell you now that EWA has a long-term, very successful collaborative working relationship with that organization. We send virtually 99.999999% of our applications to them, our public safety applications. The other 2 are APCO and AASHTO. Let me repeat, FCCA, IMSA, APCO, and AASHTO. Those are the only public safety certified frequency advisory committees. So if you try to send it to somebody else, just know that they can't certify it if it's a public safety person. But I'll, again, add a little more color on that. Data telemetry to data telemetry. If we get a data telemetry application and there aren't any VRS, there isn't any coordination consensus things they're not exclusive, they're not trunk system. Data telemetry and data telemetry will share the channel. All the coordinators may have their own unique policies on what that sharing looks like. We happen to use cumulative overlap. VRS to VRS is not exclusive. They share because they're compatible. They can hear one another. They can, so there isn't any exclusivity between VRS to VRS and data telemetry to data telemetry. Here's a thing that was in the FCC's rules. It's pretty clear. They make it clear. You can assign VRS users, multiple VRS users in the same area in the same channel, even if the loading goes above 50 units. But they don't want, they don't want to have all this spectrum be gone in the let's do this right. Let's do it on a rational basis. VRS can share with VRS. Data telemetry can share with data telemetry. However, if you are proposing a vehicular repeater system and there is a data telemetry incumbents, in accordance with the LMCC Consensus Coordination Protocol, I know that's a mouthful, there needs to be an engineering evaluation conducted to ensure to the maximum extent that you can mitigate the interference between those two disparate technologies sharing a single channel. EWA is prepared to do those analyses for whoever the applicant is, and I'm sure PSCA can do the same. I'm not so sure about all the other ones, but because you got to do this right. You got to do this right. If I think if a coordinator tries to do a quick and that looks good to me and uses shot glasses to try to figure this out, that's not going to work, because data telemetry needs to be protected, and VRS people that invest in that technology need to know their investment's going to be well worth it, and it's going to work, and they don't have to fear interference from incumbents. So the engineering analysis is pretty specific. It's a yes or a no. I don't want people, now you can obviously talk to entities, you can try to mitigate things, you can do a little more in-depth analysis to make it work, but at the end of the day you got to prove this to the incumbents and the applicant that it's a good solution, and EWA is absolutely willing to do that. The Commission is so concerned about this interference thing, they've instructed the coordinators to attach on the application when it's electronically submitted to the Commission the engineering study. I like that. It gives me an opportunity, if I look at anything that looks goofy in another part of another coordinator, I could challenge it. And believe me, EWA will. As a part of digging down, do a little bit more work, we can look at the specific locations of the remote telemetry facilities, if they're using directional antennas, et cetera, we can do Longley Rice, we can do more sophisticated analyses to prove to the various licensees that the interference is minimal, if at all, and we can do more in-depth studies. And believe me, we'll do that because I just think it's a good practice, and we're trying to maximize the use of this spectrum. So EWA will do that, and I'm almost assured that PSCA will as well. So what is the Consensus Coordination Protocol? Well, it's a sort of I think any time there's new disparate technologies sharing where they weren't sharing before, the game is going to change, and the frequency coordination protocols are going to be a little bit more sophisticated. This isn't like you have an analog to an analog, or you have trunk to commit. This is a little bit more sophisticated. So like the first cut, if a VRS facility, and by the way, this is all vice versa, if a data telemetry system comes in, he goes, I want to go in, Troy, New York. I just picked that facility. And there's a VRS, no VRS is located, greater than 100 miles away. Well, we don't need to do any analysis. And so that one can probably be concurred with. But if we find, and I'll stick that it's a VRS applicant, and we find that there are data telemetry systems within 160 kilometers or within 100 miles, we're going to prepare and conduct the following analysis. And this was adopted by the LMCC. You find the fixed coordinates of the data telemetry, and based on the antenna height, power, ground elevation, etc., you plot the 19 dBu interfering contour of the telemetry system. And then the VRS area of operation, the acceptable ones are one of two things. Either a county, as I said earlier, or a maximum 80-kilometer radius. If the 19 dBu interfering contour of an incumbent data telemetry system overlaps a county border where a VRS system is deployed, or the 80 or less kilometer radius, the frequency is not available. So it will fail. Next step, of course, is if it fails, you can try to seek consents from the incumbent, or you go to the next step and you really drill down and do more intense engineering contour analyses so that you share that with the parties, you work with them. You might go to the VRS person and say, hey, listen, I know you asked for 80, but what do you really need? I really only need 30. Perfect. You redo it, 19, and I'll show some examples. The 19 dBu contour does not overlap the 30, but it would the 80. So you tell the VRS person, you want this channel? Lower your area of operation to something that's more that you really need, and guess what? You've got a channel for you. But this is pretty much what it is. No one within 100 miles, you're good to go. If you have, say it's a VRS, and there's a 19 dBu contour that we predict, that we plot of the incumbent data telemetry and overlaps the acceptable area of operation of the VRS. If it overlaps, it's a no. If it doesn't, it's a go. And failing that, you get into a little more intensive negotiations and other types of engineering to make sure that it works. That's the process. We're going to have to do maps. We're going to do, I asked the commission, actually they haven't responded to me yet, but one of the questions I asked them, I go, but what if we don't have to do the analysis, right? Or what, do we still have to show you an analysis that it doesn't overlap, or there isn't anybody? I mean, I'm just trying to save us work, and the commission hasn't responded yet. But so this is just a sort of a crazy question I had. So for illustrative purposes, here's a picture. The circle is the VRS, and the irregular contour is the 19 dBu of a data telemetry system. And in this instance, you'll see in the title, it's incompatible because they overlap. However, as I was saying earlier, the vehicular repeater party goes, okay, I don't need 80. Actually, all I need is 25. And we go, oh, now look what happens. It passes. You can have the channel because there's no overlap. This is a little bit, this is one where there's a county. And I apologize, I don't know if David Iron is on a call or the other technical people. I know a contour Longley Rice or even an R6602 FXO won't be a perfect circle, but this is for illustrative purposes, so I apologize. But it's just assume for a moment that the blue circle is the contour, 19 dBu contour of the FXO, and there's a VRS, say the VRS is proposing I want it in this county, and we plot the incumbent and it doesn't overlap. This is good. The county can have that frequency because it doesn't overlap the FXO 19 dBu. In this case, it fails. And in these kind of cases, it's like if we see this, EW would probably get a hold of the data telemetry person and see if we could work a deal, get their consent. Are you really going that far? Things like this. There's shielding. Is there other things you can do? This one's reasonably close, but that's what we would do. But assuming all cooperative people could probably sit down, we could negotiate something and make this work. If they don't, we can't. But in this one I look at it, and we probably could do something to make this work out. That assumes, of course, that there's only this one FXO and the county. Again, this isn't really rocket science kind of stuff, but the coordinator you select must know how to do this. If they don't send your apps to them. You got to make sure that the process has a high level of integrity and that it works. I'm not a fan of counties. By the way, this is the first instance, I may be mistaken, but at least in my understanding, first instance where using everything in the VHF and the UHF and some of the other bands all based on contours or separation. This is the first time we've had to do coordination potentially to protect county borders. And you can imagine the software that would have to be written or could be written to make sure that contours don't cross over county borders. It's very, you think, oh, well, what's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal and quite elaborate and quite expensive. That said, EWA has offline software that's extremely sophisticated, and we can load those and do these type of pictures and the other ones in pretty quickly if we have accurate data. So that's that. What's left here? What do we do? So what is EWA going to do? All right, just for clarification purposes. Just like we do today, EWA accepts business, industrial, land transportation, and public safety applications. For VRS, we'll take the apps, we'll do the engineering analysis, we'll verify the data, and but we can't certify them. So we'll do a lot of the work, and we'll send it over to our good friends, the very capable hands over at PSCA, Michelle and others, and they'll look at our work, I'm sure, which is okay, and they will load it and send it on its way and certify it on the way to the FCC. Because that's the process for those, and we'll keep track of those. And obviously, people that send us their public safety apps, we send them. We keep them posted on when we get them and when they're sent to PSCA. And PSCA is very efficient. Gets things done quickly, and we'll keep you posted when the applications are filed at the FCC. We encourage folks to use our CVO application. We'll have Denisse share briefly what that is and how that's done. CVO comes in, you ask for one of these frequencies, etc. It just happens in milliseconds, and we can keep track and help and get the application going. Again, we will engage, as I said earlier, an applicant and incumbent negotiations and discussions to maximize successes for the deployment of VRS on these six frequencies. Most of the time the people are, occasionally you run into people that are absolutely uncooperative. That happened to be earlier in the week. There's nothing you can do. But most times people want to be helpful as long as they're, you don't wreck their system and you can prove to them. So we've had very, very, very good success discussing and identifying, negotiating for spectrum solutions. And in this particular area of VRS applications, I suspect that our successes will continue. What do we charge? That's always like the first thing. What are you going to charge for this? Well, if it's public safety and we don't have to do an engineering, it's $445. Do the engineering at $720, and that includes all of PSCA's fees. If it's BILT, it's $555, and this includes, of course, includes FCC fees. If you're a public safety entity, there are no FCC fees. Business industrial pays fees. And if they need to do the engineering calculation and attach it to the app and send it to the commission, the fee is $830 per channel. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Denisse to briefly show you how CVO can be used for these applications, and then I'm happy to answer questions, and I have one other little slide I want to cover. Denisse, you're on.
Thank you, Mark. As many of you know, we launched CVO back in October, and it's been a great success for customers that enter their applications into the system, and they're able to do all of the tracking for their application. As soon as you've entered the application into CVO, it's assigned to a spectrum analyst, and you'll be able to contact that person directly. The way that this helps any of the VRS applicants is that CVO will automatically date stamp your application, and you'll be able to have that information every time you log into CVO. So if you enter all of your either VRS information or data telemetry information and send it over, it date stamps it for you. And the reason that's important is because EWA and public safety coordinators are processing these applications on a first in, first out basis to make sure that everything is processed out in order. You can log into CVO by visiting our website, enterprisewireless.org/CVO. We've created accounts for most of our members, so if you enter your email address and hit reset password, you're able to do that. If you haven't yet used CVO, we are more than happy to go ahead and schedule a demo with one of our spectrum analysts to walk you through that as well. So the best way to get your VRS applications over to us is by keying them directly into CVO. And if you have any help, you're more than welcome to give us a call.
Here are the, if you have any questions, by the way, we have, can't remember, I think we had just south of 10 applications in-house for vehicular repeater systems. The majority are public safety. So we're going to get those done. If not, they're probably well on their way over to PSCA. And the only other thing I'm sort of like we need to keep an eye on is to make sure, although I think the risks are possible but minimal, that there may be, we can't be submitting mutually exclusive applications over to the Commission. They frown upon that. So I think that, but I don't think there's a big risk of that, for the first, on March 16th to March 17th. We're probably going to need to keep track of that to make sure that we don't have any instances of that. Again, the Commission frowns highly upon receiving two applications for the same frequency in the same area. And so we'll have to sort of work those out. And I'm fully confident that EWA and PSCA can discuss and arrive at some protocols to make sure that doesn't happen. Again, you can call me, but the people that run the computers and get the solutions, and they're much more adept at it than I ever will be, is Denisse Ibarra, who is on the call, and there's her contact information, and Isla Dudley, who's our Executive Vice President of Spectrum Solutions. They're sort of the resident experts in this area. Just for before we get into any questions, if we have any, we have some other webinars we're going to be doing later this year, and one of them is tricks and practices that EWA follows to find those elusive exclusive FP8 channels. It contours one solution, but actually there are, EWA does practices a number of other procedures and protocols to maximize the identification of those. So we're going to do a little webinar on that. Emission designators, I know people go, what the heck would they do that for? Well, emission designators are like the blueprint of systems now, and they're very important, and they're critical as a coordinator to find frequencies that serve your needs. We see far too many of applications come in and they go, well, just put that one in there. Well, we need the right one, because in the old days there used to be 2 emission designators, and now there's like over 60, and it makes a difference. And so we want to just do a brief tutorial on what are they and why are they important. And we also want to do one on 6 1/4. There's a lot of people that say, I got the secret sauce on how to find 6 1/4 channel. Well, there isn't any secret sauce. There's the rules that you have to abide by. There's analyses, and EWA finds. Some people stay away from them. Some people think that's the future. I think all of the above. And we're going to do a webinar, and hey, these are what they are. This is how you use them. This is how you can use them for this purpose. These are the technologies, etc. So we're going to do that. SIVO, of course, we have. If you need somebody to fly to your office and meet with all your people for how to use SIVO, we're happy to do that, and we'll do one-offs, etc. So those are forthcoming dates to be determined. I hope I trust that this information was helpful. This was again, at the risk of being redundant, have the FCC adopt these 6 frequencies, change the rules to accommodate VRS systems. It was I think a victory for our industry. And yeah, it took 5 years, but that's how long the Commission takes. And so it was a good. I think it's good for the vendors. It's good for the users, and know that EWA and others are fully equipped and capable of helping you get these applications done and working with you to find spectrum solutions. At this point, this is good. We have 15 minutes for questions if there are any. Andrea, while you're doing that, there was another little matter that came up that we've been informed of. I don't quite know how to respond to it yet, everyone on the call. I'm not sure the magnitude or the scope, but it appears that before the March 16th date, there were some applications filed for, well, first I heard somebody filed in advance for VRS, and that's not possible or it shouldn't be possible, because the FCC would have dismissed those applications as being early filed prior to March 16th. I don't think it's going to be productive for people to file if they don't need them and they're just trying to secure the spectrum data telemetry systems. To secure the spectrum with perhaps moving them later for MO3s. I'm not quite sure. I'm a little concerned about that, but we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, good questions. Mr. Smith asks, what emission designators are acceptable for these channels? These are like narrowband channels, so 11K, 4K, 6K. The emission designators that work on the narrowband channels at VHF are the same emission designators that will work here for VRS. And so 11K, I think there's an 8K, and there's certainly a 7K, and there's a 4K. And so all of those emit nothing new, right? Nothing new. In other words, you can't do like a 20K. No, it won't get past the coordinator because through rule validation that would be rejected because it's too wide for these channels.
All right. Well, I think there are probably no more questions. So thank you, everybody, for joining.
And I echo Andrea's thoughts. Thank you all for being on the call. And EWA sincerely appreciates your participation and the ability to serve you. So thank you very much.